Donald Trump just keeps on winning. It's like no matter what he does, he just keeps winning.
Oh, hell no!
Yesterday, it was all the news, all the rage to talk about how Donald Trump is going to lose control of the National Guard. There's a judge who's putting a stop to this, which, of course, is very dangerous for judges to start trying to usurp presidential authority. But that's a different matter. But within hours of everyone beating their chests on the left and saying, aha, Donald Trump is losing control, within literal hours, the move to block him from using the National Guard is put on pause. Because of course it is. An appeals court temporarily is blocking the federal judge's order directing Trump to return control of the National Guard back to California. You know, the state that is doing everything in their power to not help ICE, in fact, to facilitate the violence against ICE. An appeals court panel, this is the New York Post writing this, on Thursday allowed the Trump administration to keep thousands of National Guard troops deployed in Los Angeles to quell anti-ICE riots, and they plan to keep them for at least 60 days. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit issued the administrative stay just hours after a federal judge ruled that President Trump must return control of the Guardsmen to the state of California. The Trump administration's emergency appeal to the Ninth Circuit was filed almost immediately after senior San Francisco U.S. District Court Charles Breyer allowed Democratic California Governor Gavin Newsom to retake control of the roughly 4,000 National Guard members dispatched to L.A. at 3 p.m. on Friday. And again, this judge is an idiot, but there's a lot of political activism within the judiciary, as we've been watching over the last couple of months. Now, the Ninth Circuit's stay allows Trump activation of the California National Guard to remain in effect through at least Tuesday, when the panel will hold a hearing on the matter. The appeals court panel is made up of 2 Trump-appointed judges and 1 appointed by President Joe Biden. Breyer's order came down after hearing arguments from attorneys for both Trump's Justice Department and Newsom, after the Democrat had sued the federal government over the dispatching of Guard members to protect officers carrying out immigration enforcement operations because he was failing to protect ICE agents. That first night when the riots were beginning, it took 2 hours for the LAPD to react because the federal building in downtown Los Angeles was surrounded by nearly 1,000 crazy lunatic protesters who were trying to start fires, rioting, trying to intimidate the ICE agents into giving up their prisoners. So, of course, President Trump said, well, you're not going to help me. You're not going to do the right thing and protect my men. You, Governor Gavin Newsom, I'm taking control of the situation. Your troops, guess what? When it all is said and done, they belong to the federal government, even if they serve you outside of times of an emergency. So Trump takes command. Now, let's see. Breyer, the corrupt judge, wrote or said, at this early stage of the proceedings, the court must determine whether the president followed the congressionally mandated procedure for his actions, and he did not. His actions were illegal, the corrupt judge said, both exceeding the scope of his statutory authority, it did not, and violating the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which it did not either. He must, therefore, return control of the California National Guard to the governor of the state of California forthwith. That's the difference between a constitutional government and King George. And there you have it. This is how you know that this judge is a political activist who just happens to be wearing a judge's robe. Now, Breyer's order was stayed through 3 p.m. Friday, allowing the Trump administration time to file an appeal with the Ninth Circuit. I am gratified by the order, by Breyer's decision, Newsom said. Today was really about a test of democracy, and today we passed the test. The people passed the test. Clearly there's no invasion, he says, even though there are millions upon millions of illegal aliens infesting his state. It's absurd. And so we're gratified. Today is a big day for the Constitution. Donald Trump better abide by these orders, or we have a constitutional crisis, the likes of which we haven't seen in our lifetime. Now, Newsom is a political activist himself, and he is trying to eventually elevate himself to run for president. That's what this really is all about. He's hoping that he can turn this into a political headwind that will eventually get him to the Oval Office come 2028. However, it's not looking good for our good friend Governor Newsom. He instead looks like a political hack. Now, Brett Shumate, head of the Department of Justice's Civil Division, disputed Breyer's characterization of the president order within the 70-minute hearing. The judge only listened to everyone for barely over an hour before calling President a king, arguing that the commander-in-chief had delegated the federalizing of the Guard to California's adjutant general as legally required. Shumate also claimed that Newsom was merely a conduit for that order as it passed through the chain of command from Trump to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to the state guard. There is no consultation requirement, pre-approval requirement, he argued. There's one commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Ding, fucking ding. That's the point. Donald Trump does not need permission for a state, any state, to take control of the National Guard. It is a courtesy. Besides, if a state, for example, is in rebellion to the federal government, to the United States, you don't have to wait for permission then to take control of their military forces that they have, their National Guard troops. The whole thing is ludicrous, and they all know it. That's the point. Now, the underlining statute that Trump invoked permits a president to call up the National Guard when threatened by an invasion from a foreign nation. And when you have a bunch of idiots by the thousands with non-American flags talking about how they're demanding amnesty for themselves, that certainly, in my book, would qualify as an invasion. Now, rebellion also qualifies, or danger of a rebellion against the government, or if law enforcement is unable to execute the laws of the United States. And all of those apply here. Now, this led to some back and forth with Shumate about whether Trump discussed the order with Newsom beforehand, which, again, he doesn't have to which Shumate answered that the two certainly spoke about the situation in Los Angeles on Friday night. And 2 days later, Newsom called Trump a stone-cold liar and said the president never once mentioned the National Guard deployment in the phone call, because guess what? There was a phone call between Trump and Newsom. Now, the governor stuck by a story during his press conference Thursday night, saying he never discussed the National Guard, period, full stop. I would love to share with you what he actually talked about. It would send shivers up your spine. We discussed for a nanosecond Los Angeles, and he immediately zigged and zagged to 7 or 8 other topics. Some extraordinarily familiar and some extraordinarily remarkable, considering the world we live in. Now, Newsom said he learned about Trump's decision to send the National Guard into L.A. on social media. Because, again, you're just the governor of California. He's irrelevant to this decision. He's not the president. He wants to be the president, but he's not. Now, I learned about it when some tweet about Governor Newsom. The fact that he mentioned this shows that really pisses him off. A nickname, he clarified, by the way, that's hardly original, noting that an 8th grader used to tease him with that nickname. Well, Trump's very good at making sure that those things stick. Besides, it's better than gruesome Newsom, as the locals in California like to call you. The California Attorney General's office, which is representing Newsom's administration, countered that allowing Trump's action to stand implied that there would be no guardrails for further abuse by the executive branch. Now, the president, by fiat, can federalize the National Guard and deploy it, said Nicholas Espiritu, or whatever, the state's supervising deputy attorney general said the president, by fiat, can federalize the National Guard and deploy it whenever there is a disobedience to an order. Damn right. Because again, the president needs to be able to stop potential rebellion. And that's what's going on here. Now, while Breyer took issue with the deployment of the National Guard, he appeared more inclined to let stand Trump's order, sending around 700 U.S. Marines to the Golden State to assist with the federal immigration crackdown. Because again, this stupid political activist judge has no authority to stop the president from ordering and commanding his troops. He's just a little pissant judge who has no real power, but thinks he does. And Newsom indicated that he believes the corrupt judge is waiting for the evidence that Marines actually have been deployed into Los Angeles before ruling on whether Trump has the authority to do so. And again, that judge has no say, no authority to tell Donald Trump that he cannot deploy the troops. Now, they cannot do police activity unless there's an insurrection act and a few other different scenarios, from my understanding. However, they can guard federal buildings. And they can absolutely guard federal personnel, like ICE agents. Meaning, let's say that you have ICE going to a location to make an arrest. They can bring in troops to protect them. And while they cannot directly involve themselves in the arresting of the targets for the ICE agents, they can, if the ICE agents are attacked or they are attacked, respond. And Trump can do that at will. Now, there's been a lot of rhetoric from Pete Hegseth, that's his name, that they've been deployed, but it doesn't appear that they have been, but they are making you believe that, the governor said. In a brief filed with the California court before the hearing, the Justice Department stated that courts did not interfere with President Dwight D. Eisenhower when he deployed the military to protect school desegregation in 1957. Courts did not interfere when President Richard Nixon deployed the military to deliver the mail in the midst of a postal strike in 1970, and the courts should not interfere here either. Abso-fucking-lutely. Right on the money.